Welcome to today's episode of Words of the Wise. Today I have retired Chief David Rivero from the University of Miami Police Department in Florida. He had 45 years experience in law enforcement. Almost 19 of those years was as chief. And I'm really looking forward to having his insights and his vast knowledge on policing and wellness on today's episode. So welcome, retired Chief Rivero. Thank you so much for being here.
No, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here talking about something very important. So,
Yeah, absolutely. And you look like you are loving retirement so far. You just look like you're glowing and smiling. And how has that been so far for you? I know you just retired maybe a couple months ago.
yeah, April 11th was my last day. And you know, I the thing with cops that retire is they really don't have a plan.
Mm.
I have a little company that I started many, many years ago that I tutor officers on how to take promotional tests. I teach basic investigations. So I was looking forward to getting that up and running full time. I was doing it part time. It was mostly word of mouth, but now I'm really diving into that company. Not because I need the money, I have plenty of money. It's just something to keep me busy, um, and something that I really enjoy, which is teaching. So
Yeah.
I just hope that any officer that's thinking about retiring that they have some sort of a plan for what they want to do. You know, and for me, it was golf, bowling, pickleball, going to the gym. You know, all those things were part of the plan, along with getting my company up and running.
I really appreciate you saying that because I do think that it can be a tricky transition, especially if you don't have anything on the horizon.
Mhm.
And I've had many conversations with like this before where people are like, I don't know what to do, or I don't know how my skills transfer, or, there's only so many lakes that you can fish. And so what's next? So I really appreciate that advice of, hey, maybe plan ahead, have
Mhm.
some things that you are passionate about that you want to do in retirement. And like the fishing, the golfing, the working out, the physical activities, those things can be a part of it. But what else can you do to set yourself up for success so that when you do retire, you have that nice long retirement that feels fulfilling, and you have other things to kind of keep you occupied.
Yeah, for sure. And you know, I see it with other um cops that work with me that have retired, and their life just turns to crap.
Mm,
They don't do anything physical. They sit around drinking and eating, and they gain a lot of weight. And I always said to myself, I'm not going to be like that. I'm going to have something to do. Yes, retirement life is a life where you do very little, but you have to have a few things in there to give you something to look forward to. And you know, even in my sleep, I'm thinking about what can I add to my training, what classes. You know, I always coming up with more classes to teach officers, you know, to help them. So have a goal, have something to do. Don't just sit around gaining weight and getting out of shape, because really cops die 5 years after retirement. That's like the average length of police officers. As soon as they retire, they're in decline.
yeah.
So make sure that you have something to do, some plans. And it could be becoming a carpenter. It could be simple stuff, working at, you know, one of these Home Depot type stores. Uh, but just have something to do.
No, I love that advice. And you can see if anyone's watching the video, like you have the business owner passion and bug in you where, you start dreaming up things and you can tell that that's going to keep you going. And so having, like you said, having some interests, making sure you're focusing on your physical health and your mental health, and then having something that is going to keep you going. Because if you don't have anything on the horizon, I think that that's when you start to see that decline. Like you said, you start to live that
Totally.
sedentary lifestyle. You don't have anything to look forward to. I've seen that happen with people in my life where they kind of just stop moving, and everything falls apart. So I appreciate that advice. I wanted to kind of talk about your career because 45 years in law enforcement is a really long time. And when you and I spoke offline, and I don't typically do this where I'm like, ooh, tell me your cop stories. But I do want to call you out a little bit because you said you started in the 80s in the city of Miami. And during that time, it was the cocaine cowboy era. It was the number one murder capital of the country. And it was called Little Vietnam. And I was hoping that you could maybe just tell us what that was like to be in policing in Miami in the 80s.
Yeah, so I started in 1980, and that year we had one of the biggest riots ever in our county. Multiple people killed during that riot. It lasted for a month or more. We also had the Mario boat lift, where Castro emptied his jails, his mental hospitals, and sent all those people to South Florida.
Mm,
So that was a huge impact on crime in the city of Miami. So, and then the cocaine cowboys. You know, there's been so many movies about that era, uh, and that was huge. Cocaine was king in South Florida, and it generated a lot of crazy murders, a lot of crime. Um, so that's when I started in patrol, and I loved the action. I love the team that I work with, um, and every night was just adrenaline rush. You know, there were chases, shootouts, uh, multiple arrests. Uh, we were very busy, and because we were so short, you could work overtime unlimited.
mm,
So I worked like 32 straight days, one, 1 month and a half, because they were so short. What happened was right after the 1980 riots, a lot of officers from the city of Miami said, enough. I've had enough. I'm not doing this anymore. And a lot of them retired, where we went from over 1,000 police officers to nearly 750 or
wow.
700. So the hiring was huge. They hired a ton of cops. We were all rookies working together, training each other. But it was really a great time in policing. Uh, what we learned in a couple of years, most cops out there would learn that in 20 years.
Yeah.
So the learning curve was really short for us. We had to learn how to handle so many things so quickly. Uh, and then because of all the murders were Spanish committed by Hispanics, by Spanish speaking people, they needed detectives in the detective bureau that spoke Spanish. They didn't have that many.
Mm,
So they drafted me to go work homicide. After just 2+ years in patrol, I'm now a homicide detective.
mm,
So that was huge. A lot of things that I wasn't ready to see, that I could have taken my time learning how to deal with some of that stuff. I was thrown right into it immediately. So I did that for about 6 years, working homicide, and then I started to want to get promoted, and I went through the ranks fairly fast, and I had a great time. Every assignment, I was so lucky that every assignment that I got was just phenomenal. Uh, and yeah, I had a great almost 27 years, a great time at the city of Miami. I call the city of Miami the Harvard of policing. If you work there, you got a Harvard education in
mm.
policing.
I love that. And I mean, it sounds like you were really just thrown into the fire from day one. It
Yeah,
was like, all right, let's go and, learn in real
yeah.
time as a really young officer and learn how to adapt to the situation and the environment at the time. And I know that it's funny because you're like, yeah, like there's so much overtime and we got to work 32 straight days. And now, like, thinking about that, like how hard that must have been on you, like physically, mentally. But like when you were a young person, it was exciting and new and
Correct.
fresh. So I can see like both sides of that.
No, I didn't even want to take vacation.
Yeah.
Like I remember taking a week of vacation and I missed so many things that I hated the fact that I went on vacation.
Yeah.
I didn't want to go.
I can
Uh,
see that.
but I was able to cope with all of that, uh, mainly because I didn't have a wife, I didn't have kids. I
Mhm.
just had my parents, and they were great, very supportive of me. I lived with them until I got married. Uh, but I could see where family, cops with family and kids, are affected by what they were seeing and what the dangers of the job. And so there were a lot of divorces, a lot of issues, family issues back then. And I really never understood it until later on in my career, what policing can do to a family. Um, so, yeah, I was lucky. Then, I remember going when I was in homicide, going to a Sid's death and the mom holding the baby, and I felt no emotions.
Mm.
I really was just matter of fact. And looking back at it, I really wish I would have done more to help that mom understand what a sit's death is all about. Uh, uh, but I didn't. I was very cold. I was very matter of fact. I was always professional, always did my job, but I wasn't compassionate enough. I wasn't emotional enough. And, I wish I could redo a lot of those responses that I had as a homicide detective, responding to the biggest thing that could happen to a family.
Yeah.
And I didn't help those families enough. Uh,
Yeah, I think it's a really good point. And I'm curious to kind of hear your feedback on this because I've heard this before, where leadership is asking that question. They're like, how do we train younger officers to be able to empathize with the community in experiences that aren't lived experiences or things that you can't relate to? That situation as someone who doesn't have kids is going to impact you differently than someone who has young kids at home,
yes,
right? And if you have young kids at home and you see that, I can imagine that that would impact you in such a different way because now you're relating that experience of being a father, of being a mother. And so, how do we train young officers, young detectives to be able to have that sense of empathy to unlived experiences, things that they can't relate to?
I know. I wish I would have had someone that would have modeled the behavior that I should have
Mm,
uh, shown in responding to a baby's death. So I think modeling the behavior is probably the best training out there that you could uh, show
mm,
young officers. Hey, when you respond to a baby that just died and the family's holding the baby, don't rip the baby out of the mother's arms as soon as the morgue gets there. Let the mother uh, finish, uh, her feelings and saying goodbye. So there's got to be some sort of modeling that we can do, uh, which back then they didn't do any
right.
uh, modeling. So I do a lot of that. Well, not anymore. With my kids are older, but my wife and I did a lot of that with our kids. We modeled the behavior that we wanted them to learn and show in the future.
Yeah.
So I think that's a probably a good thing. But there's so many opportunities. There's so many different uh, encounters that how do you model all of those?
Right.
That's the biggest thing. And then if you have a 1,300 man police department like the city of Miami, you can't get to everybody.
Right.
There's no way that you can put everybody through a training where they you're showing them the behavior that you want them to learn and do. It's very difficult. So a lot of it they learn on their own, and some of them learn the bad behavior, thinking that that's the right one, and some learn the good behavior to show.
I think
So
there's always going to be learning experiences no matter what. And we talk about this a lot on this podcast, but this reality that you guys are humans and there's always going to be, quote unquote mistakes. There's always going to be learning opportunities when there are humans doing the job. And the hope is that you learn from it, right? So, the story that you said of like, man, like I wish I would have done that differently. I'm imagining throughout your career you did do that differently as you evolved and as you
yes,
grew and matured
yes,
in the career, and then you're able to relay that message to younger officers of, hey, like I learned the hard way that this was not the best way to handle that situation, and I'm hoping that you won't, do that same behavior, that you'll learn from me. And so I think it's an opportunity as individuals for us to learn from the things that maybe we didn't do the best.
right.
But then to also teach other people underneath of us of, better ways to do that moving forward. And it's this forever evolving thing. I think that you have to be open to adapting and open to changing and learning and growing for that to happen.
Yeah, and having that the mentality of every opportunity is a learning, teaching opportunity.
Yep.
And I think a lot of leaders don't think that way. Uh, but that's it. That's a critical thing is for leaders to always take any opportunity to teach and to mentor and to model and to show. Um, and when I was chief, I always sent folks, how could we have done this better? That was my standard email, no matter what the situation, no matter how good we did it. We did it perfect. There's still an opportunity to learn. So I would send them all an email. Hey, can you get back to me? How could we have done this better? And that was something that I use quite a bit. And the university believed in CI projects, continuity improvement, um, continuous improvement. So that was something that was, drilled into my head when I first started at the university. That continuous improvement mentality,
Yeah.
which we didn't have at the city of Miami. We really didn't have it at the city of Miami. We were happy to survive the day and not look at it how we could have done it better for tomorrow.
Mm,
Uh, we were just happy to survive the day.
yeah.
Whereas at the university, we had a lot of opportunities to get better, and continuous improvement was a huge thing. Um, but that's so when you're a leader out there on the street, you're a sergeant, corporal, lieutenant, take every little opportunity to teach and, look for improvement with your folks. And that's how policing is going to get better, and asking questions, and how could you have done this differently, how could you have done this better, is there anything that would have helped you, any equipment, any training, anything that could have helped you to make this situation better? You handled it well, but you could have done it better. So those are the questions that I think as a leader you should always have in your head.
I really like that mentality, and I think that it's trained mental behavior to be able to find the growth opportunity in the good and the bad. I think that to your point, a lot of people, when they do things good, like that's kind of where that growth ends, right? It's like,
Mhm.
oh, we did it good,
Yep,
cool.
yep.
Instead of saying we did it good, how can we do it even better? I really like that. I think that, you know, my brain works that way where I'm like, how can I be the best at what I do? Like, that's totally my personality of like, how can I be the best? And
Right.
if you are always looking for opportunities to grow and to do better, then you are striving to be at your most elite. And I think that that's a really good goal to strive for.
Yeah. And I use it with my teachings. So whenever I teach something, As soon as I finish teaching and I'm done, I sit down and I take some notes and write things down on how I could do it better next time.
Hmm.
And it's constant, constant, continuous improvement. If you have that mentality, you will reach really high levels in your profession.
Yeah, 100%. I wanted to ask you, you said that, through your career, and you said this to me offline, and I wanted to repeat this because I thought this was so powerful. You said that you see, you smell, you hear the worst. And you said that you saw how that impacted other people's marriages and their wellness. Can you maybe dive into that a little bit? Like, what did you see? How did that impact wellness? Because we know that back then there were no wellness resources really
Zero.
at all. Wellness wasn't something that was really talked about really ever. And so,
Yeah.
how did you see that impact? And can you maybe explain a little bit about cumulative stress and trauma and PTSD through policing?
So I think that that's the biggest mental health, physical health that's affecting officers today is that cumulative PTSD. So
Mm,
it's not that one big bomb explosion, during war where many soldiers get killed, and that will affect you forever. In policing, it's little incidents, little visuals, little smells, uh, little sounds that start creeping into your head and you can't get rid of them. And they start accumulating in your mind to a point where it could affect you. Well, it'll change you for sure.
mm,
Uh, it'll change your mental health absolutely 100%. And then it starts affecting your physical health too. So cumulative PTSD, cops see things, hear things that no human being should ever see or hear or smell.
mm,
And there's no coping mechanism. At the university, if we had an officer that responded to a bad traffic accident, we would immediately have an HR person contact the officer, make sure he's fine or she's fine. How did you deal with that? Are you okay? We didn't have any of that
mm,
in the 1980s, in the 90s. Uh, and I don't think a lot of departments have anything right now. It's your folks like you that are starting to provide resources for officers to cope. And there's always the stigma that if you reach out to somebody for help, you're weak,
right.
you're mental, you're not a good officer, you can't handle things. I don't want to be around him. I don't want him as my backup. He's seeing us a sociologist, a psychiatrist because he had a bad incident 2 weeks ago and now he's mental. So that stigma is one that cops avoid. They rather deal with the stress, deal with the PTSD internally and very weakly because they don't know how to deal with it, than asking for help. And at the university, we came up with a wellness hour, so every officer could take an hour to meditate, to work out, to do whatever they needed to read a book. This is your wellness hour. Every day you have one. You could sit in the cafeteria and eat lunch for an hour, or you could go work out for an hour. And then we started with the spiritual. So we invited every month. We had five religious, venues on our campus. So we would invite one of those religious folks to come talk to our officers for an hour, at least once a month, and it was all voluntary. We didn't force anybody to attend. And at first, it was maybe five of us. Then it grew to 10, and then it grew a little bit more to, just pray or listen to a spiritual person talking about, how you can cope with things you know, and then we instituted the mentor program, which anytime we hired somebody, we partner them up with a mentor. And it didn't have to be cop with cop. It could be a cop with a dispatcher, a cop with a security guard with a crime prevention. So we had folks that we trained to be mentors, and we assigned them with for any new hire got a mentor assigned to them, and that's a person you could talk to them about anything you want. They're going to try to guide you. They're not going to do anything, go to senior staff on you because you're asking questions. So that mentor program really helped a lot of folks cope with,
Yeah.
starting a new job at the university. So, um, those three things I think were our biggest accomplishments at the university.
I really like the idea of the mentorship program for a couple of different reasons. One, I think that coming into this career knowing that you're not alone and that
Mhm.
there are people that you can lean on and people that you can learn from and talk to who have maybe more experience than you
Yeah,
do, I think is really powerful. And I also think it goes back to what you were saying before of when you have a larger organization, how do you get this type of messaging across? How do you display certain actions that you want them to learn, and if you're pairing people up together, then they have the opportunity to have someone model that behavior or
yeah,
share some of their learning experiences so that that person doesn't make those same decisions and maybe makes better decisions for themselves. So I really like that idea of a mentorship program. I wanted to ask you with cumulative stress, cumulative trauma, cumulative PTSD, what are some of the signs that you've seen, that would indicate to you that someone is struggling and maybe needs those types of resources or needs help? Like, are there any certain like flags that you've
yeah,
seen throughout your career that's a good indication that someone needs some of those resources?
sure. So the number one flag is complaints. So if the officer now all of a sudden, he's a great officer, never got a complaint. Now he's had three complaints in a row, all in 1 week. That's a flag.
Mm,
There's something there that we need to dive into to see what's going on. Um, Sickness, calling in sick, uh, using a lot of sick time, being late, excessive force.
mhm.
There's a lot of flags out there that tell you something is off with this officer.
Yeah,
And a lot of times, especially in big departments, they miss those signs. In little departments, it's easy
yeah,
because you as the leader are pretty much close enough to see and hear what's going on. But a leader of a huge department it'll never get to him or her
yeah.
that this officer is struggling. And, you know, it's only through the brothers and sisters of that officer that you're going to save them if they come forward, or if they have a really good sergeant or a really good direct supervisor, will be able to save that officer that needs help and prevent him from getting fired,
Mm,
which is your number one job as a supervisor is keep your people out of trouble. So, if you're seeing an officer going through issues uh, in his work performance, there's got to be something, an underlying cause to it, and you need to get to the bottom of it to help him. And that happens through conversations, through spending time off the job, speaking with family members. You have to be proactive in trying to get to the underlying cause of why this officer performance has deteriorated. And a lot of times, as a supervisor, we don't do that. We manage the performance day to day and during the work shift, but we don't dive into why is that happening. and
Yeah.
the why is important. And a lot of times these officers are looking for someone to help them.
Mm.
Um, and unfortunately, I've seen it where the help never comes, and then they do crazy things like killing themselves, which I've seen so many times in my career with officers, uh, killing themselves over the job.
Yeah.
Um, so your job as a supervisor is to get to the underlying cause of why the performance has changed. And there's so many categories, uh, financial, burnout, uh, marriage, health. There's so many reasons why the officer's performance and PTSD, of course, has deteriorated and become worse. And you, as a supervisor, you need to get down to that underlying cause, and then kick in all the things to help them or
Right.
help her overcome it.
Yeah. And it's such a multifaceted challenge, right? You mentioned a lot of different things. There on one end, there's still the stigma of,
Mhm.
people being afraid that they're going to lose their job or they're going to be perceived as weak. And, I think that that's starting to go away more than it was in the past, but it
Yes,
still exists, and we know that it still exists. And so we
yes,
have on one end the people who do need help feeling ashamed or afraid to seek resources. And then on the other end, we have people who maybe aren't trained to see the
mhm,
warning signs and or are afraid to speak out. And I've heard this before where they're like, hey, like, we don't want to get someone in trouble. We don't want them to be mad at us for like bringing it to, someone else's attention. How do you think that you can train peers and leadership to look for those things?
mhm,
But furthermore, how can you train them to have the confidence
yeah,
to ask the hard questions or to tell somebody else about it?
yeah. That's really hard to be able to teach and um, get across to folks how important it is to ask tough questions. I go back in my career. We had a lieutenant that ran our aviation unit, and somebody accused him falsely of some things, uh, and he killed himself. And he used to come into my office because it made I was the spokesperson for the department, so it made the news. It was on TV and the papers. So he would come into my office to ask me, "Hey, David, what's going on? Anything? Have you heard anything about my case?" And I never asked him if he was thinking about killing himself.
Mm.
And I wish I would have asked him that question. And I wasn't trained. I didn't know anything. I really wish I would have had somebody say to me, "Hey, this guy is really going through some tough times and he needs help. David, maybe because he's speaking to you every day, maybe you can help him." And I didn't, and I failed. And on a Sunday morning, he killed himself right in front of the helicopters.
Mm.
Um, and it haunts me to this day that I I I could have saved him, you know. And I didn't see the signs. I didn't uh, ask enough questions for whatever reason. I was afraid. I was, you know, afraid because he was a lieutenant. I was a sergeant. I was afraid to, you know, I don't know. I don't know. It's just something that it'll live with me until I die.
Yeah. We talked about this a little bit, but I truly do believe that some of our hardest times that we go through in our life are our greatest opportunity to help others and to teach others. And so my hope is that anyone who's listening to this can take that as an opportunity to ask the hard questions.
Ask
You
that
know,
question.
ask the
Ask that
question.
question.
Don't be afraid,
Yeah.
and it could potentially save someone's life. And
Yeah.
so I appreciate you being vulnerable and sharing that. And I hope that anyone who's listening learns from that experience, and is able to put in place, action within their organization to ask the hard
Yeah,
questions.
yeah, yeah. And don't be afraid. You can always navigate the conversation. If the person gets offended or if the person gets mad at you, you can always turn to, hey, I was just trying to help you out. I, you know, I'm trying to do good for you. I'm here to help you. You can
Mhm.
count on me. I care about you. You can always navigate that conversation to fix the fact that you maybe offended him or her by asking that tough question. But always ask that tough question.
Absolutely.
Has suicide crossed your mind? Are you thinking about killing yourself? Ask that question.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I know that you talked about your family being a support system for you, and we talked about this a little bit, but how can we also help families to be able to identify signs? Because we know family members will see the change maybe quicker than people within the organization. Um, do you think that agencies can do a better job of supporting and educating the families too? So now
Yeah,
we have two directions that we can help people, from an organizational standpoint. Peers are looking out, leadership is looking out, asking the hard questions. But then at home, how can we also train family to be able to
yeah,
see those signs and to seek help and to ask those hard questions as well?
yeah. I think it. I mean, I've seen it more now, uh, where we're getting a lot of family sessions, training for families. We just had one at the university a year or so ago, where we invited the families of officers. We had a big auditorium and we had some speakers to talk to them about exactly that. What are some of the signs uh, that you can look for, and where can you turn to help your husband or wife or significant other deal with what they're going through. So I think it's critical that the families and the city of Miami, my wife for 27 years never went to a training session
Mm,
at, at the city of Miami. I mean, I left in '06, so maybe things have changed recently, but um, there was nothing for the families back then.
mm,
And I think that now you're starting to see a lot more, and it needs to really ramp up, where uh, when you hire a new officer, there should be a session immediately for the family.
mm.
What are some of the things that that officer is going to face? What are some of the things that will change him? And if he starts to change, what are some of the things that you can do to help him deal with those changes?
Yeah.
Yeah, very important. Families are huge.
And we know that, obviously things are changing, from what it was 40 years ago to what it is now. And we've seen a lot of change within the last 5 or so years. I think there was really kind of that pivotal point that everyone, who's
Yes.
listening can say, yep, that was kind of that time where we knew that things were drastically changing in the direction of wellness. What do you think is still missing, or what can organizations do? Because there really isn't a uniform
Mhm.
standard or uniform effort. It's every department is kind of on their own trying to develop these wellness programs and offers so that they can support their people. But what do you think is still missing, and what change can be made to make it better?
That's a great question. And, wellness is dealing with like a sickness. So maybe it needs to come from the federal government dealing with, now they're looking into all these vaccines and all this medication and red dye. Will include in there also stress, PTSD, and how can the government help organizations? And it's not just cops, it's firemen, it's dispatchers, it's ambulance drivers, it's anybody that deals with stressful situations needs to have a little bit of training for the family and for themselves on how to cope and how to deal with it.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, there is no state level mandate, there's no county level mandate. It's all organizations like yours or Boulder Crest or all these others that are out there that are starting to receive some funding to help folks deal with PTSD and stress, but there's no national level model that
Right.
everybody should follow. And it's going to take a leader in the White House or a leader in the state capitol to create a program that says, look, this is what I want every agency to do, and here's some funding for it and get it done. Uh, because some departments don't have the money to do anything for their cops, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Uh, at the university, we did have a little bit of funding, but not a lot.
Hmm.
Uh, but there's some agencies that are just barely scraping through, um, to provide the mandatory training that the cops need to keep their certifications. So that's all we're going to give you. We're not going to give you anything beyond that because we don't have the money.
Yeah.
So that's the difficult part of all of this. And God bless folks like you and all the folks out there that are trying to do something for officers, um, because divorce, suicide, uh, all the things that go with stress is also costing a lot of money. It
Right.
costs a lot of money,
Well,
uh,
and it's costing lives.
and
And
lives. Yeah.
yeah, and I agree with you that funding is so challenging for
Mhm.
agencies all across the country.
Yeah.
And there have been some states who have put out grants to help fund
Yeah.
it, but it's not uniform and it's not across the country. It's in, specific states that are starting to do it. And so my hope is that more things like that start to happen, where maybe there's grant opportunities, or like you said, government is going to take over and say, no, we're going to support you. Because it is hard when there isn't any money to help
Right.
support, the things that we're saying. I also think that it's going to take a uniform buy-in from everybody,
Mhm.
from leadership, and from the people who are wanting to take advantage of the resources. There has to be like this uniform break of stigma, this uniform
Yeah.
support. And I think, we talked about the importance of, being able to deal with change and to adapt. And I think that, from a leadership perspective, there are a lot of individuals like yourself who, you know, did not grow up in an environment where wellness was supported, and it was actually ingrained in you the total opposite. It was like, deal
Mhm.
with it, get over it,
Yep.
keep going, rub dirt on it,
Yep.
don't show weakness. And so
Correct.
this ability for leaders who have been in this career for a long time to be able to change and adapt to the times and have an open mind when it comes to wellness, and have that same shared goal to save lives and to set everyone up within your organization for a long and successful
Yeah.
life. And just
Yeah.
like you, a long and successful retirement. And so I think that a few things have to happen. I think that uniformly leadership has to prioritize it and say, yes, this is something that we're going to focus on. And then I think when that happens, everyone else will feel more safe to reach for those resources. But I agree with you. I think funding is a challenge. And so it's something that I hope will change in the future.
And all you have to do is look at the statistics.
Mm,
The number of suicides between our military and police officers and first responders were at the top of the chart.
yeah.
Uh, so the stats are there. Is it just needs the data is there. We just need a program, somebody to have the fortitude to say, I want to help these folks out by instituting a program, funding it, and let's roll it out and get it out to everybody.
Yeah. I'm gonna take this clip and I'm gonna send it straight to the White House. Let's see if we can make a change here. No, I appreciate your insights so much. I have one final question for you, and it's in the context of wellness. What words of advice would you give to someone who's just starting out in this career when it comes to wellness? You know, maybe something that you wish you would have known earlier in your career or something that's helped you along the way.
So, number one is have a goal for your career. So, when I first started in patrol, my very first day sitting there in patrol, the captain that was in charge of that shift was just a imposing, incredible figure, sharp, looked great, spoke well. And I said, I want to be a captain one day. So, just like him.
Mm.
So, have a goal of where you want your career to go. Don't just be happy with being there day to day. So, have a goal. Uh, take care of yourself physically, work out. Physical health is huge. And then give yourself some stuff for your mind, whether it is reading, meditation, spending times with friends that are not in the same profession, because you don't want to keep hearing the same stories over and over again. And that was one of my biggest positives, is that all my friends, none of them were in law enforcement.
Mm.
My closest friends, none of them were in law enforcement. So I really disconnected when
Yeah.
I was hanging out with my friends. So I beg folks in the law enforcement profession to make friends with folks that have other interests, uh, and spend time with them. So mental health and physical health, and have some goals. Um, you know, I as soon as I wanted to take the sergeant's test, as soon as I could, I took the sergeant's test, the lieutenant's test, the captain's test. So get help to get you promoted, get help to climb the ladder, have a goal. Uh, and then when you retire, you'll retire financially sound because you went up the ranks. So, it's important that you start your career with goals. Um, and my very first day, I set that goal. So, yeah, it's difficult because not everybody's going to follow that recipe,
Yeah.
but there's other items you can add to that recipe to, bake that cake, that'll still be good for you. And it doesn't, it might not be that you want to climb the ladder in policing. It might be that you want to start a business, in real estate or in construction or do something else. That's okay. But keep yourself busy outside of policing.
Those are great words of advice. I appreciate it. And, we talked about your mentorship program and helping people to take those tests if they are looking to promote. So I'll kind of throw that in there. If anyone's listening and that is their goal is to promote, maybe they can reach out to you for some help on,
Absolutely.
how to pass those tests. So
Yeah, it's a easy webpage, investigations101.com. Go there. And I've been very successful. I have it down what it takes to pass these promotional tests,
yeah,
and I can help you. And keeps me busy. I don't make a lot of money from it, but it keeps me busy, and I love when they invite me to their promotional ceremony. I
yeah,
just tutored a kid that was taking a lieutenant's test, and he finished number 2 on the list.
that's
And I
amazing.
said, God, let me know when you go get promoted. I want to be there.
I love that. And anyone who's watching the video can see like how passionate you are about that. And you just look so happy with that. So I'm happy to give that shout out. And so anyone
I
who's looking
appreciate it.
for help, reach out and thank you for your time. I appreciate you coming on here and sharing your invaluable knowledge with me. And that's all I have for you. But if there's anything I missed, I want to give you the floor to wrap it up.
Uh, you have been wonderful in all our conversations before the podcast, and I love what you're doing, and I wish you all the best.
Thank you. I wish you all the best too. I really appreciate your time.
Anytime.